Okay, welcome back to Greenplum Summit 2020, our own reimagined digital customer conference. And for those of you who are just joining, my name is Jacques Eistock, and I'm pleased to introduce my next guest, G. Lim. With the previous talk from George around securing our data, G is going to help us understand what can be done when disaster strikes. So in her talk about Greenplum as an on-demand disaster recovery solution, let's listen in. G?
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Jacques. Hi, I'd like to talk to you today about on-demand disaster recovery with Greenplum. So to help set the context for our discussion today, I think it probably is helpful to at least review what we know about how prepared customers are, organizations are with disaster recovery preparedness. And to best discuss this, I'd like to just talk about what a recent survey findings from the Disaster Recovery Preparedness Council, what they found. And what they do is they measure how prepared organizations are in recovering critical IT systems in the event of a disaster. Stats show that roughly 1 out of every 3 companies have not adequately prepared for disaster recovery. In some cases, this means organizations have no documented business continuity plans in place, or they haven't even considered what technologies or solutions, what they would need to keep operations going after a disruptive event. Many organizations do not have the skill, time, or money to test disaster recovery preparedness. Make no mistake, this is a surefire way to lose a whole business after disaster strikes. I think Dilbert probably says it best. Many companies view budget as a huge challenge to overcome when they look at disaster recovery planning. Regardless, disaster recovery is something that all organizations must shoulder and give serious attention to, as the increase in cyber attacks, sensitive data breaches, and system outages have become a common repeating theme. According to a study by Deloitte, less than 10% of companies are able to survive a major disaster when they have no disaster recovery plan in place. Recovering after disaster is a costly drain on productivity. When disruption occurs, staff are forced to shift their focus to restoring operations, keeping them from their highest priorities. More often than not, the main challenge that many companies face with having disaster recovery in place is not only budget, but its lack of proper disaster recovery planning. There's obviously a high cost and even technical debt associated with building and maintaining a separate data center, including all the all the infrastructure and software that goes along with it. But beyond that, just being able to execute disaster recovery successfully, being able to meet service level agreements, whether it's recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives, all of those things should be taken into consideration when looking at disaster recovery planning. So that brings us to why one of the best solutions to emerge in this area is really the use of cloud technologies. Given the complexities and limitations of traditional conventional on-premise backup and recovery solutions, there's clear value in fully transitioning to a single comprehensive cloud-based solution. The public cloud provides for great on-demand disaster recovery solutions in terms of things like flexibility, the ability to define different recovery objectives based on your workloads, but also being able to dynamically shrink and even grow your disaster recovery resources and site when necessary, and even automate that as well. A big win for the public cloud is just in the areas of just cost optimizations. It's extremely cost effective because you only pay for the resources when you use it, and you can spin it up on demand. You can avoid paying for dedicated sites as well as dedicated infrastructure just to be able to have a disaster recovery plan. And then last but not least, the ease of use is a huge winner. It makes disaster recovery and high availability easy. There's no need to build out your disaster recovery solution from scratch because a lot of the automation is already taken care of for you, especially when you're using Greenplum in the public cloud. So when we look at just the complexities associated with managing a disaster recovery plan, there are a lot of moving components that you have to manage if you're doing this on-prem. There's various networking, load balancing, firewall, and even all the infrastructure components to run Greenplum. In contrast, the public cloud makes it super simple because it abstracts a lot of the underlying moving parts. And really the key area that you need to focus on is having some kind of storage or snapshot-based storage area in the public cloud to house your backup data. Now, when we look at the public cloud, Greenplum is available in all the public cloud marketplaces, and all of the solutions within the marketplace, whether it's AWS, Azure, or GCP, what we do is we enable organizations to seamlessly back up and extend your disaster recovery capabilities within a matter of a few minutes. A lot of that is fully automated, like I said, and you can have a full enterprise-ready Greenplum cluster ready to be used once you go through the motions. To help illustrate that point, let's look at some common scenarios where we have potentially this scenario where a customer is running their primary Greenplum cluster in the cloud, as well as trying to implement disaster recovery in the cloud. This is the simplest use case just because we've automated a lot of the underlying backup and business continuity capabilities within the Greenplum marketplace offering in the various clouds. What we do behind the covers is we automate backups that occurs via the cloud snapshots, and that occurs at periodic intervals without any user intervention. We can take a full cluster backup within a matter of minutes. And again, all of this happens by default. And then when it's time for you to actually spin up a disaster recovery site on demand, it's as simple as, again, going into the cloud marketplace. So my example here, we're using the AWS marketplace, but it could have been true for the Azure marketplace or even the Google Cloud marketplace. The great thing is you can take those same backup data where you've already captured it via snapshot and copy it across regions or different availability zones. And once you spin up your Greenplum cluster using a marketplace, which takes less than 60 minutes, all you then need to do is basically take that backup data and restore it to that disaster recovery Greenplum instance. And once that data is all hydrated, you can simply start using it and point your clients to that new Greenplum instance. So very, very simple. Let's take a look at the next common scenario that we see. Next slide, please. In this scenario, we have a lot of customers still running their production environment on-prem, and they may be looking at extending their disaster recovery capabilities by implementing DR on demand in the public cloud. In this instance, again, we do need to capture a full backup of Greenplum. Depending on the size of that Greenplum backup, it may make sense for you to leverage a data transfer appliance from the public cloud vendor in order to facilitate that data transfer, because it may take much too long to actually replicate the data via the WAN, if you will. So you can use something like AWS Snowball or the Azure Data Box or the Google Transfer Appliance to facilitate that. And the cloud vendor would then copy those backup files to the cloud storage bucket, for example, AWS S3, as we might in this example that you see here. And once that's all in place, again, you can just simply stand up a DR instance by spinning up a new Greenplum cluster and then hydrating that the backup data and putting that in the Greenplum instance. Now, obviously, there could be some incremental data that has occurred in your on-prem environment. And if there's deltas that you need to capture, I would then suggest that you capture the incremental you do an incremental backup on your on-prem and ship those changes over to the public cloud, and then restore it in that DR instance. And once you have that all reconciled and validated to where it needs to be, again, you're ready to rock and roll, and you can point your clients to that DR instance. In summary, the on-demand Greenplum is a great public cloud use case. It's great because it's extremely cost effective. You can easily reduce your data protection costs by up to 50% or more. You have a great deal of flexibility in terms of adding new capabilities, as well as growing your resources or shrinking it on demand. One thing I didn't mention is, even if you do want to have a warm standby Greenplum DR instance, you can also leverage our ability to pause the Greenplum instance to reduce your consumption in the public cloud. So there's many ways to actually do disaster recovery very effectively in the public cloud. And a key element to this is we've taken care of a lot of the disaster recovery orchestration. One thing about leveraging the public cloud marketplace is we've incorporated all the best practices associated with Greenplum and automated all of that so that it's really a no-brainer when you do disaster recovery in a public cloud. And last but not least, it's really very simple to add this new capability and extend disaster recovery to your existing Greenplum environment if you're not doing it already. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for listening in to my disaster recovery, on-demand disaster recovery session today here at Greenplum Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, G. The talk was fantastic, and the power of infrastructure native Greenplum to truly run anywhere can save organizations obviously tons of money, huge operational benefits, and allow you to use the right tool, in this case infrastructure, for the right job. So again, I can't thank you enough. This could help a lot of customers who are trying to figure out their journey to the cloud. This could be a natural first step for some of them.